Hello and welcome to another edition of the Lakers Theory Podcast. I am Shane Jackson. Joining with me, as always, is Austin Case. I said we weren't going to be. It wasn't going to be long until we were back. As long until we were back, because it had been months until our most recent podcast, and now we were back at it. Like, I don't know, a week, 10 days later, and it's exciting. Austin, how are you doing? And since the last time we spoke,
I'm doing well. Not much has changed for me, at least, but I'm doing good. So that's all that matters.
you say that as someone who definitely has changed the background of his setup. Like, your walls have been painted since our most recent podcast. You have a much more advanced setup in terms of your computer, and I actually have a desk. So basically, we are on the up and up.
Yeah.
Today is going to be a pretty quick podcast, though. We're going to talk mostly schedule stuff. The Lakers' official 82-game schedule. They are back to playing 82 games this year. Just became official a couple days ago. And we are going to get into it on this Sunday afternoon. You'll probably be listening to this on a Monday or Tuesday of August 23rd or August 24th. But yeah, it happened a couple days ago. We'll just kind of get into our favorite games, what we're kind of looking forward to, what our early predictions for that first 10 games are and all that stuff. But feel free to comment in the YouTube section, Facebook section, wherever you want, of what you're most looking forward to, which game you are looking forward to. I have a feeling I know which game that is for most Lakers fans, and I'm sure Austin has that for one of his answers as well. But let's get right into it. Austin, your overall thoughts on the schedule.
I mean, it's just a schedule, so it's not that exciting. But it seems like they have a fairly easygoing schedule to open up, and we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit. But I mean, it's a schedule. I don't know how excited or interesting I can talk about it that much, but there are some games that I look forward to. So, yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, so 12 of the first 15 games are inside Staples Center, so that's beneficial. Lakers get kind of the advantage early on by playing a lot of home games. I think only 3 of those are against playoff teams, but let's focus in on the first 10 games because, as you had mentioned, you created the outline. Lakers Twitter was kind of talking about the first 10 games in particular. I think that's always somewhat helpful for the NBA seasons to kind of break it up into, stretches like that. So let's look at this first 10 games and what are your predictions for how the Lakers will do from the 10 games out of the jump?
So I'm predicting that they go 8-2. I think they will drop opening night against Golden State, and then I think they will drop that game at Portland. And so my reasoning behind that is they kind of struggled last year with guards, just defending guards in general. And so I just think that kind of carries over this year, just because they don't have, I guess their 1 and 2 defenders probably are not as strong as they were last year. So I still think they'll have troubles with defending the 1 and 2 position, but yeah, and so that's just kind of where I see that going. Steph Curry, he is just going to do what he always does, and the same goes for Dame. So I think they'll have issues with those 2 guys as everyone does. So that's why I have them 8-2.
Yeah, I think 8-2 is a pretty good call, especially when you look at. Just looking at the teams, it seems rather favorable in terms of who they are going against, right? From the jump, it's less about maybe the home being a home and more about like who they are playing. But the home certainly helps. I think you probably made the right call. I went ahead and put 7-3 to be different. I said they would lose actually to Phoenix. I think I would feel more confident in Golden State. Knowing, I guess, based off what we know, that Klay Thompson probably isn't ready to start the season. But that Phoenix game in particular stands out to me, and I think they probably maybe lose that game from the jump. But they definitely losing one of those first 2 games feels about right. And then I think they maybe drop a game that they shouldn't because that's the way maybe we got used to watching them play basketball last year. I'm just kind of less optimistic when they have like a back-to-back against Houston or something like that. So, yeah, I think they lose one game that they shouldn't, and then, the Portland game as well. So 7-3 in the first 10 games, and that would not be too bad. Let's highlight a few games in particular. What games are you looking forward to?
So I'm really looking forward to that first game against the Clippers, December 3rd. Just because I feel like any time they play the Clippers is a big game, but it's not the first game of the year, and so they'll have some traction under them before they have to face them. So I look forward to that game. Not that it is a big deal, but I always feel like you want to beat the Clippers the first time you see them, and every time you see them, honestly. So that's a game I look forward to. Obviously, the Christmas Day game, I look forward to that. I'm sure just about every single Lakers fan out there is also has bookmarked that game on the schedule. And then also, I just look forward to the game against Utah on January 17th, mainly because that's just my birthday, and I feel like they never play on my birthday, or at least they haven't the past couple years. So that'll be a game that I might possibly try to go to. It's in LA, so we'll see about that. But I know I've been telling my wife Mallory that I do want to go to a Lakers game for Christmas. The Nets tickets are very expensive, so I don't know how that's going to go down. But maybe my birthday is a possibility, but we'll see. So those are really just the 3 games, kind of to kick off the year, because I don't think they're quite, or maybe they're a little bit past the halfway point come the Utah game, but those are kind of the 3 games that I look forward to start off.
Well, I guess we could just see how much your wife actually loves you. Like, if you get to go to the Nets Lakers on Christmas, that means she must love you a bunch. Whereas if she settles for your birthday, she loves you a lot, but a little bit less, right? I think those are good games, and I wanted to be different after seeing your picks. But obviously, the Christmas game stands out to me as well. I already mentioned it, but the first game on my kind of top 3 games was against the Suns, and it's literally the second game of the year. The Lakers really don't have to wait long to kind of avenge maybe that elimination in the playoffs from last year, where they probably felt like, if healthy, they could have won that series. Again, that was probably the game I predicted they lose, so I don't think it goes that well. But I mean, if that would have been the first game of the year, I think that would have been exciting. So it is pretty exciting that happens so early on in the year. I highlighted at Milwaukee on November 17th, and that's really because that's the start of a 5-game road trip. And as I mentioned earlier, the Lakers really start at home a lot early on. And then I think that road trip in November, which is 5 games, is kind of the first long road trip. And starting with the defending champs on that road trip is probably not ideal, but that would be an exciting game. And then I put at Denver for the season finale. I think we're about to get into this a little bit, but down the stretch, I mean, the Lakers have a somewhat challenging slate, and then ending with Denver, who was as hot as anyone at stretches, at points last year. I think that is going to be a big test for the Lakers, and it'll be interesting to see how they close out the game. So let's get into that. The final kind of month and a half, and how it may factor into maybe that playoff performance, playoff seeding, early playoff performance, whatever it is. I mean, there's a lot of home games, and the negative of that is that you play a lot on the road and play challenging games down the stretch. So what do you think about how the Lakers have to close out the year?
So they really had 14 of the last 21 games are on the road. There's something I did notice that just within that month and a half, they just have one back-to-back stretch that's on the road, and it's Toronto and Washington. So from that standpoint, that's not too bad. But I think it'll be fairly taxing on them just to be away from Los Angeles. Just for that whole stretch, essentially, you come back for a night, then you just hop on a plane, and then you have to go to the next spot. So I think that'll be kind of tough. And they're just really going to have to kind of, buckle down. I think just with the way the West is, they're going to have to win a lot of these games and just just be resilient in the way that they go throughout that last month and a half.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the schedule here, if you're watching on YouTube, March 29th and on. I mean, at Dallas, at Utah, at home against New Orleans, home against Denver, at Phoenix, at Golden State, home against OKC, and then at Denver to close out the season. I mean, that is your game 75 through 82. Just looking at that little chunk. And that is basically the opposite of what the first 10 game stretch is for the Lakers. I mean, that is almost as challenging as it gets. So I think you bring up a good point, is like maybe less so about seeding, because, when you get to a certain point in the season, maybe guys are resting and all that stuff too, because who knows what seed you actually want to be in and all that stuff and how that kind of shakes out. But less so about that and more so about, like, is it going to be taxing on your body? Is it going to be, maybe you're more tired going into the playoffs than you originally anticipated? I think that is probably the bigger issue potentially for the Lakers. So I thought that was a good point and worth discussing before kind of close out the schedule talk there. But before we get out of this podcast, you had been talking about this kind of Marc Gasol news that's kind of surfaced over the last 48 hours and kind of what that means for the Lakers. So I'll let you take the lead on this. What's going on with Marc Gasol, and should we be worried?
So I would just consider it whispers, even though it is out there. But there have been talks that Marc Gasol might not be back. He's still under contract, so I think for him to not be on the team going into the season, he would either have to just say, "Hey, I'm done with basketball," and retire, or just talk to the team and then just mutually be like, "Okay, yeah, let's end this." And there's some kind of buyout agreement. So I don't know how serious that is. I feel like he's a good type of individual to have on the team, because he can come in and get minutes if you need him. He could start if you need him to. So honestly, I don't know. I feel in between on if he didn't come back, I wouldn't be too worried about the team this year. And if he did come back, I would feel indifferent essentially. So, but really, if he did leave, I feel like there's just really two ways it could go for the Lakers. Either they go out and try to find another five, because if Gasol does leave, then it's just Dwight at the five position, or they can just look to just add another wing defender, which I think they have 3 roster spots open right now, and essentially that's what they're doing. They want to fill those with wing defenders, so possibly they just throw another 4th in there. But that's kind of their options if that were to happen. If you have any thoughts on that, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you have a preference between the two? Because I know I do. Do you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
I kind of want to start. I think I would prefer another center if Gasol was to not be on the Lakers. And I think my thought process was, I understand that we both know that the best solution for the Lakers is that AD plays at the 5, right? But that's just not contrary to whatever we want to believe and how Lakers want to feel about this team. Like, AD is not going to play a lot at the 5. And so maybe having another guy in there to mix in and almost eat up minutes at the 5 position and kind of like take that pounding throughout the regular season that AD doesn't have to is probably the best way of going about that. And then reserving maybe AD at the 5, more of the bulk of those minutes being in the playoffs when it matters, or saving them for games when they matter in the regular season, and less so for the day-to-day grind of the regular season. So I think my preference is add a 5, have a guy who can take the pounding, the body to do that, so that AD doesn't have to, even if we believe that is the best case scenario for the Lakers.
Okay, so do you have anyone particular? I know I kind of jotted down some names. So, like, for me, I think bringing DeMarcus Cousins back could be an option.
Yeah.
And there's Aaron Baines that I think could possibly come in. Obviously, I have no idea what kind of contract Aaron Baines would be looking for. So if he wants more than the minimum, then that's just not possible. So
Yeah.
Those are just some names that I saw that were still available free agents at the 5 position.
Yeah, and I think obviously best case scenario is it's a guy like Gasol, right, who can add some floor spacing element to the position even though he plays the 5, and maybe that is not as viable an option when you entertain the free agent market at this point in the summer. Because a lot of those guys tend to be gone. So maybe you want to steer into more of a, another Dwight Howard and just have a similar type center as that. Obviously, I think best case scenario probably is Gasol is still just here with the Lakers. But if you can get a guy who can floor space a little bit, that's the ideal route. But maybe you just have to settle for a guy who is more physical and plays that kind of style at the center position. And then that maybe alters what you want to do at the starting, 2 position.
So another thing, like with the wing defenders, these are just some names that are already circulating for the final roster spots, but maybe it's more serious if Gasol were to leave. So, like I have Avery Bradley, I believe he's still on the market. James Ennis, he's already linked to the Lakers with the spots that they have, but I also put down Wes Matthews. He's familiar. Essentially, Avery Bradley and Wes Matthews, they're both familiar with the system already. And they kind of add that 3-and-D aspect that I guess the Lakers probably need on this team. And so, and honestly, the route that the Lakers have taken is bringing back guys that have already been on the team before. Yes. So that would make sense if Avery Bradley and Wes Matthews were on this team come the start of the season. I would not be surprised.
Yeah, fits the requirements for what the Lakers are looking for this summer. No, I think that was good and that was important to get to. And any of those options are intriguing. I think that pretty much does it for us. I think we wanted to make it quick, and I don't think you have anything else that you want to get into, right? Okay.
Nope.
So yeah, we'll try to do, even if it is a short podcast like this, we'll try to do this at least every other week and see if we can't come up with some sort of content up until the season starts, just to remind you guys that we are here. But remember, comment on what game you're most looking forward to on Facebook or YouTube or however you listen to this podcast, and make sure you subscribe to us on all platforms as well. He's Austin Case. I'm Shane Jackson. Thank you so much for listening to a Lakers Theory podcast, and see you next time.